Hi, bookworms! Welcome to Best Book Ever, the podcast where we talk about your favorite books. I'm your host, Julie Strauss, and my guest today is Mark Leslie Lefebvre. Mark is a writer, an editor, a trusted book industry expert, a dad joke ninja, a professional speaker, and an all-around book nerd. When he is not haunting bookstores or libraries, you might find him haunting local craft breweries. Get it? Because he writes horror, you see? Anyway, I'm super excited that Mark is here with me today to tell me why Earth Abides is the best book ever. For more information on how to support this podcast, check out my Patreon. For about the cost of a latte, you can have access to exclusive interview clips that are only available to my patrons, advance access to the books we discuss, and more. Go to patreon.com, that's patreon.com/bestbookever to learn more about how you can help me keep the candles burning over here in my reading cave. Now, back to the show. Hi, Mark. How are you today?
Oh, I'm doing great, Julie. Thanks for having me here.
Thank you so much for joining me. It is always a joy to talk to you about books and everything, but books mostly.
Books especially. Yeah.
Books especially. Exactly. Mark, tell me a little bit about your reading life. What role does reading play in your life?
Reading is my life. Reading is central to everything that I've always done and everything I aspired to do. Books are so much. Books contain universes within them. And I have long been, from the time that when I was a child and my mom worked at the corner store in our small town, and every Tuesday she would bring home comic books for me to read. I devoured them. I remember going to the library when I was a child and just being so excited that you could take these books home. And then you can go back the next week and get more. And so books have always played that role in my life. So it's not surprising that I wanted to be a writer and a bookseller. It's not surprising that it feels like, as a bookseller, though I've worked really, really hard, I've never worked a single day in my life because I've gotten to interact and like what you're doing with this podcast. I got to talk to people about books all the time, and every once in a while I have work to do too.
Best job in the world.
Yeah, exactly.
And do you read a lot of different genres in your recreational reading time, not for work, but when you're on your own? Do you read widely?
Yeah. I try really, really hard to read widely. A few things I try to do. I try to go back and read the classics that I should have read when I was supposed to be studying them in school, or that we never studied. Like, we had never studied To Kill a Mockingbird. And I think I only read it about 15 years ago. So I always try to go back and read some classic, just because there's so many great things that are. The reason that they are classics is because people keep talking about them. Howard's End, for example, a really good friend of mine handed me a copy of that, and I still haven't read it, but it's one of those things I'm looking forward to reading. So I usually always have a classic in mind that I want to read next, and yeah, there's always, I always have at least 3 or 4 books on the go at any given time, because I kind of, not only do I genre hop, but I jump from book to book to book. And I'm constantly reading different nonfiction and fiction, and it doesn't matter. And I look at the nonfiction not just for professional development as a writer, but just for personal development as well, and things that I can learn and experience through, biographies and all kinds of other great nonfiction titles.
What did you think of To Kill a Mockingbird when you finally read it?
Oh my God. I'm glad I waited until I was an adult, because Atticus Finch was a major character. He was a father figure and a hero to me when I was reading it. And just the way that, she looks at her father. Now, my son is reading it now for school, and I'm having so much fun talking with him about it. Especially because, having read Go Kill a Watchman, which I'm sure you've read as well, you learn that it wasn't necessarily the way she saw her father, that things weren't the same way. And that in my mind is the perfect example of the editor she worked with. When Harper Lee sent in the original manuscript, which is Go Set a Watchman, the editor said, no, I want to see, she talked so much about her childhood and how much she adored her father. I want to see that story. And then that in my mind was like, thank goodness, because you can almost like the new Star Wars films, you can almost just forget that the later book that came out 35 years later, that you can forget it exists, and you can just go back to the classic and just enjoy that for the pure goodness that it is. And it's also a sign, I think. I mean, books speak so much of life in the experiences we have, and there is no going home, there is no returning to that innocence of childhood, and that's really what those two books together tell us. So I can still appreciate them, even though I still want Atticus to be a hero.
Yeah, me too. I took Go Set a Watchman. I took it really hard when I read it because I did grow up with Kill a Mockingbird, and it was kind of devastating to read Go Set a Watchman because I have this idealized version of Atticus Finch, and that's the one I'm sticking with.
Yeah, we're allowed to do that, right? We can selectively, because you've got to remember that he still inspired his daughter to become the woman that she grew up to be, right? And he still had that positive influence, and he still did good.
Yes.
He still helped, right? So I'm always looking for the positives.
So then how did you come across this book that we're talking about today, Earth Abides?
Yeah, it was in high school. I enjoyed science fiction, I enjoyed fantasy, and I enjoyed scary stories and true stories of like Sasquatch and Bigfoot and the Loch Ness Monster and UFOs and all that weird stuff that I was just interested in. And Earth Abides. I mean, this is actually the cover, and I know this is audio, but the cover that I'm looking at was the original. This isn't the original one I picked up. I managed to pick up a copy of it years later. But it was this picture of this bleak post-apocalyptic world. And I was very interested in post-apocalyptic fiction because to me it was never about the end, but it was about new beginnings. And I remember first reading it when I was in junior high school. And then forgetting, like reading it, loving it, and then forgetting about it. And I think it was at a used bookstore years later that I found it and went, "Oh my God, that's the book," because I recognized the cover. And this is the copy that I've had with me ever since. And I've bought multiple copies of it and given it away. And I think I later learned that Stephen King based The Stand, one of his magnus opus novels. Oh. It was inspired by this novel, And I mean, this was originally published, in 1952? Is that when it was? The original text came out. 1949 was when this was originally released. And just having reread it this year in 2020, I am amazed. Now, there are some issues with some of the language and some of the terms that he uses, like he uses the term Negroes and stuff like that. But I mean, it was 1949, so I'm going to forgive him. He's not a man of 2020. He was a man of 1949. There are some elements in that, a little bit of sexism as well, that he engages in. But I'll forgive him for that because there's so many universal truths in this novel, so many wonderful things. Liz and I were reading it together, and we had to pause because we were reading it aloud to one another. And we had to pause and reflect on, holy crap, he's talking about today. I mean, I never realized just how much this would come back to haunt me in so many ways.
Do you guys read out loud to each other a lot?
Only shorter pieces, like articles that we really want the other person to see or hear. Sometimes we'll just read it to the other person, like while we're in bed and she's reading on her computer or a book that I'm reading. We've never done a full-length book like that before. And she's a fast reader and I'm a slow reader. So doing it that way allowed us to actually keep pace with one another.
Right. And
so what was cool is because we each have a copy of the book. Different versions, so there are different pages, so we can't say we're on page whatever, so we have to stop at chapter ends and stuff like that, and we would just alternate chapters. But my eyes would be scanning the text as she's reading it, and that was a really, really fascinating way to read, because it reminded me of the way that, the teacher used to do the reading assignments, and every student would take turns reading a paragraph. And then you would go and you would be following along. It kind of was like, I haven't done that since I was in school. Yeah. That was kind of a neat way to experience reading. I hated it back then, but I love it now.
And I would think, as I read this book, I read it. I didn't listen to it on audio, and I imagine it's a really different experience hearing it read out loud.
Yeah, yeah. So it's funny. Now I have my voice and Liz's voice, but I've also listened to. I did get it on Audible, so I could kind of go through and get caught up because Liz and I aren't quite finished our reading, and I wanted to reread it. So I listened to that, and I was really impressed with the narrator. I was really impressed with his voice, and it's amazing that having read the book a couple of times previously over multiple decades, there were moments like the one that I had read that came back to me so easily. There were other ones that I completely forgot. And there's these amazing passages in the book that are kind of like, well, Ish, at the beginning, he was a student and he's studying ecology and all kinds of things. And it's almost like it was his essay that made its way into the book, talking about the population spurts and growths. And even, I'm not sure if you've ever read The World Without Us, which is a nonfiction book about what would happen when humans go away.
No,
Kind of
I
like the
haven't.
animals are coming out and they're wandering the streets and stuff like that. And it's amazing because I was working at McMaster University bookstore when that book came out and the author was there on campus. So I went to see him speak. And so then, of course, I had to go read the book. And The World Without Us was a fascinating look at what would happen. Well, Earth abides. That's what would happen. It wouldn't take long for the weeds and the grass and all those things to destroy all of this crap that we've dumped onto the earth. And the one thing I think about Earth abides is I think they're eating food 20 years later from cans. I actually don't believe I believe botulism might have happened. I believe that it probably wouldn't have taken. I'd like to have faith in humanity that it wouldn't have taken 20 years, and Ish was the only one who wanted to do stuff and build things. But I recognize that he had to go 20 years into the future because he had to have a whole generation of people who had no idea what civilization was like. That they were, they were the old people, the old times, the gods from the days of yore, and all of these tales of moving pictures and stuff.
Right.
So I think he wanted to explore that, and so he took maybe some creative liberties. So I'll forgive him for that.
Why don't you give a brief rundown of the plot of this book for our listeners who have maybe not read it?
Yeah, so Ish is the main character. His name is Isherwood Williams. We just call him Ish because it's way easier, kind of like never pronouncing my last name. He's in a remote cabin, and he is bitten by a snake just around the time that these people show up who are really, really sick, and he's sort of heard some news on the radio that there's this weird virus going around killing everyone. He gets really, really ill, and he's not sure if it's from the snake bite or the virus, and he almost dies, and he wakes up. He picks up a hammer, which is critical. The hammer is a critical symbol throughout, and it's very blatant symbolism right from the beginning, that he always remembers to pick up the hammer. And then he ends up stumbling back down from the mountain into civilization and realizes that the majority of the population has died from this massive virus that has, back in 1949, there was air travel and there were ways for people to commune this disease, not quite as efficiently as we can today, but very few people were resistant. And so he struggles in the rubble of society to make his way around, navigate some of the other survivors, and then eventually connect with the right people and slowly begin to rebuild a new civilization. And maybe we can do something. And that's what I love about post-apocalyptic fiction is maybe there's a way we can right the wrongs of the past. Maybe there's a way we can pause and refresh and know that the way we did things isn't necessarily the way we should continue to do things. So again, classic post-apocalyptic, classic end of the world or post-apocalyptic, or Twacky, the end of the world as we know it, is a genre potentially of fiction.
That's interesting. I didn't know that's what's considered classic post-apocalyptic because I was expecting, I guess, The Walking Dead.
Oh, and there are no zombies.
There are no zombies in this book. And I know very little about post-apocalyptic fiction, and I guess the reason is because I tend to avoid it because I'm scared of, zombies eating brain things. I just don't read that kind of stuff. And that's not at all what this was. So no. I was really surprised at how literary it was.
Well, did you ever read the Chrysalids from John Wyndham? Do you ever have
No.
to read that in school? And that's basically about nuclear war, and it's basically 30 years after nuclear war, and some of the children have mutated, but they also have special powers, and mutants and people with special powers are like they have the ability to read each other's minds and speak to one another without speaking.
Oh.
And it's, I mean, the Hunger Games, right? That's kind of post-apocalyptic when you think about it, but
Yeah.
it's
Oh, that's true.
way future post-apocalyptic.
Hmm.
So, sorry, I got excited. I loved reading when I was in high school. I love that genre or that
Uh-huh.
subgenre. So I was constantly looking for that fix of just after society crumbles.
The only other one I could think of that I have read that this reminded me, well, this obviously influenced is Station 11. Did you ever read that one by
No, I
Hillary,
haven't.
Emily St. John Mandel? Am I getting that right?
Yeah,
And
Emily St.
that's,
John Mandel, yeah, a
yeah,
Canadian author, and that is on my to list. I've read some of her other work, but I haven't read that one yet.
yeah. And I like that one too because it was also very literary and it wasn't people killing each other. It was the same central theme. How does civilization go on? In that one specifically, how does art go on? How does culture go on? Who's in charge
Right.
of culture? And I kept thinking in this book it was all about who's in charge of civilization.
Right. It's funny that you talk about wanting to avoid zombies because I have as well. And I was at a horror writers conference. The Horror Writers of America had their conference in Toronto, and Brian Keene was a horror writer who had written a novel. I can't even remember, not Dead City because that was a sequel, but he had won the Bram Stoker Award for a novel, which was a zombie novel. And I was sitting in the back going, I don't read zombie novels. Like, just like I avoided Stephen King because he was too popular until I had discovered The Body based on Stand By Me. And I went, oh, this guy can write. Um, and so Brian Keene said, this is not a novel about zombies. It is the novel about a man who loves his son so much he will do anything to cross the U.S., a zombie-fested U.S., to save his boy. And I went,
Mm,
that's a novel I can read. I can't read a zombie novel, but I can read a novel about a man loving his boy. The Road,
mm-hmm.
Cormac
Yeah.
McCarthy, very literary, but
Yes.
post-apocalyptic fiction. So it's funny. I'm compelled to read a story because of the humanity and the characters and even the love for a son, right?
Mm-hmm.
Very, very an emotional thing for me. And so that will allow me to try something that I think I might not like
Mm-hmm.
because it's like, okay, the zombies, whatever. I just want to find out if he saves his son, right? That's the thing that compels me.
And I like your assessment at the beginning of this conversation that it's not a book about the end, it's a book about the beginning.
Yeah, I did in what we had grade 13 or senior high school, which was the fifth year of high school way back when, and I had done my essay, the big cumulative essay for English class on post-apocalyptic fiction, and I read Earth Abides and a whole bunch of other reread Earth Abides and a whole bunch of other books, and I only found one book in that genre that where the world actually ends, where it
Mm.
just ends and everything's over. And that was Childhood's End by Arthur C. Clarke. And it was kind of shocking because in every other book, like my thesis was that the books about the end of the world are not about the end of the world, they're about new beginnings. And here's the exception that proves the rule. This Childhood's End is about the end of Earth,
Uh-huh.
which was kind of terrifying. I got to the end and I was so upset because and I guess that happens in all of you. You get to the end and you're like, but wait, I've invested all this time and I care about these people. Well, how could you do this to me?
Have you ever reread that book?
No, I haven't, and I don't want to because it pissed me off,
It
man.
hurt too much. So I kept thinking as I was reading this, it was such an interesting experience, obviously, to read this book for the first time in the year of our Lord 2020.
Yes.
when, when
I'm
we are go-
surprised you made it all the way through,
I
actually, because I
know.
was reading it going, oh, what did I put Julie into?
I will say when you suggested it, I thought, oh hell no. But I really once I started it, I was very happy to be reading it. But I have to imagine that it must have been a really different experience for you, who has read it at different phases in your life. Certainly, the first time you read it must have been a time where you could not have fathomed this could happen, and now you're reading it at a time when a pandemic is happening, and not only that, but you are a father, and this is so much about parenthood and what the kids are going to do next with what we have left. And so I'm just curious what it was like to be the age that you are and the father that you are in the world that we're in, to read it again.
It was almost prophetic when I think about why was this such an important novel to me my entire life? Why was this always among the 3 favorite novels I've ever read and always talked about? And I think it was fascinating to be rereading it. Well, to be discussing it with you, knowing that you were reading it at the same time, but also to be rediscovering the book through Liz's eyes, because she had never read it before. Uh-huh. That was fascinating, and also the discussions we had. I know this is sort of a weird thing. I reflected back to my early writings and poetry I had written when I was a teenager, as well as short stories. So much of it was inspired by moments in this novel. There's a scene where Ish is in San Francisco, and he realizes he's driving on the right-hand side of the road. He doesn't have to. There's no other cars. Uh-huh. He's turning on light switches out of habit. And I remember doing that as a child. When the power went out, you leave the room or you enter a room and you turn on the light switch. And so I was finding today doing things out of habit, even though they're not necessarily safe. Liz and I would joke when we were leaving the house, well, don't lick anybody, right? Because of COVID-19 and stuff like that, as a joke. But as you know, I'm a very touchy, huggy, feely kind of guy. That's a disturbing thing to imagine, this world where, my natural instinct is to reach out and hold people and to touch them and in a very consensual, disgusting way. But I'm a huggy kind of person, so shaking hands and all of that. And I haven't even had the opportunity to experience what that's going to be like as we are most likely now going to be wearing masks or now going to be doing whatever. And so I think reading the book now makes me think we haven't even scratched the surface of how the world has changed. We haven't even gotten to the beginning of it, only because the majority, except for the 6 trips I haven't gone on since this pandemic has gone down, most of my life hasn't changed. I'm just working from home, doing my digital thing, having virtual meetings with people, and trying to get some writing done. So not much has changed. I think we're still only in the short term. When I look at historic pandemics, we got a couple years to go before we get through this. This isn't going to be over anytime soon. So we have to think about long-term strategies. And that reminds me of Ish. And Ish is the only one who sees beyond the, we can just go down the store and grab a can. Liz, for example, had used to have a magnificent garden on property that she had owned when her girls were young. She's rediscovered the joy of gardening, and she's got all these herbs and plants and stuff, and redoing the entire backyard so we can grow our own food. It's like, which is almost, and again, you can kind of see some of that coming from reading Earth Abides, some of it coming from, we're really way too dependent on other things. Right. How are we gonna change? So I wonder how, if I'm around in another 20 years, I wonder how I'm going to appreciate the novel in a different manner then. So when Alexander's telling his kids about this time where, and the whole school year was canceled. Really? That would be awesome.
Or maybe school as it exists now won't even exist then. And he'll say, we used to do this crazy thing where 30 kids sat in a classroom together. And his kids will say, that's bizarre.
Well, it's funny. I know people, really awesome people who have done homeschooling, and I learned about how well they can actually teach kids all of that stuff without wasting 6.5 hours out of their day. They can actually, if they do it properly, and now everyone's learning that that's possible.
Well, and that same thing struck me as I was reading too, how funny it was that, not funny, but how interesting it was that what you're seeing on social media right now is people kind of going back to the old ways. All of a sudden, everybody's gardening. Everybody's making sourdough bread all of a sudden.
Exactly.
Nobody goes to their fancy gyms anymore. Everyone just works out in their garage. And it's funny that we're sort of resorting to the old ways in a lot of ways. And then reading this book, there was a moment where he's trying to describe to one of his kids how to get somewhere to get, it was something, a car part he needed. And he realized that the way he talks about direction to his kids, they don't understand it, because he says, turn left on Elm Street. And the kids say, Elm Street doesn't mean anything, because they run through the field and past the creek and, turn right at the rock.
Exactly.
And
they can't read, most of them.
Yes, exactly. And so he comes to understand that his way of interacting with the world doesn't make any sense anymore. It was so interesting to read right now and think, what is going to change? What's our new way of understanding things going to be? I don't know. We're too early to know.
It's true. It's funny. He even talked about states. Like, and he was trying to describe, that's in this other state. And well, they wouldn't understand what a state is. They know what a city is because they live in one, but they don't know what a state is. They don't know what a state line, because I think some of the people are like, what is there? And it was kind of funny. Was there a big wall between them? Because you look at a map and there's a line there. Is that a wall? Like, no, it's just a artificial construct based on some sort of leadership that doesn't exist anymore. Yeah. So it is funny how something like that makes you wonder how can we hit the refresh button and figure out if there's a better way to do it, rather than the way we've always done it before.
Mm-hmm. What do you think you'll leave behind when we come out of this? What do you think of your old life you'll leave behind when we're post-pandemic and we're all vaccinated and we can jump back in the pool again?
Things that I used to do that I don't think I'll do anymore. I think it's a tough one for me, because I'm a serial procrastinator. But I think I will do my best to not put off those things that were important to me, because you put them off and you may never get the opportunity. I mean, I've had amazing moments in my life where, the last time I saw my dad, I kissed him and told him I loved him. And holy shit, so thankful for the chance that I did that. So if I have the opportunity to express to someone how important they were, or how important they are, to take that. And so, I mean, that's something I've rediscovered multiple times in my life, but it's something that is hitting home even more. I know we are going to get through this, and everyone's going to know somebody who died from this. And I'm actually at risk. I have high blood pressure. I've had pneumonia multiple times, so I'm in that category. And so I think pausing to appreciate the people and things that you have is something I really hope I stop taking for granted going forward. Mm-hmm. How about you?
Oh, gosh. I am going to stop doing busy things that don't bring me happiness. I'm too old for it. I do a lot of things it has paused my work life and made me reassess what I want to be doing. And I'm just not going to waste my time with anything I don't want to do anymore.
Yeah. I like that.
Yeah.
I like that. Well, it's almost like, so with books, to bring that back to books, I was a judge for a contest, a science fiction contest here in Canada, and I was shipped 120 books, and I had to read them because I was one of the 5 judges. And I was going, oh my God, I'm such a slow reader. And I talked to the one organizer. I said, dude, I don't think I'm going to get through it. He goes, you're not reading them all, are you? I went, well, I'm trying to. He goes, no, pick it up, start reading. If you get to a point where it ain't holding you, drop it, move on to the next one. And that gave me permission in my personal life, because I always felt like there's this confirmation bias. Well, I bought it and I'm not an idiot, so therefore it's got to be worth it. Or other people have read it, therefore, well, maybe it's not for me. So if I'm not into a book, I will put it down. Sometimes I'll pick it back up again. Mm-hmm. I did that with the Timothy Findley novel once, and I picked it up again 10 years later, and I loved it, but I didn't like it the first time. Maybe I wasn't ready for it. But I've given myself permission. If I'm not enjoying it, It's okay
Yeah.
to just move on to the next thing. It's like toxic people in your life, right?
Sure.
If you're finding that this is like you said, like if you're not getting something out of the task, why are you doing it? Why are you investing all this energy in it if it's just causing grief and anxiety? There's so many other great people. There's so many other great things you can do that give you joy and give others joy.
Yeah.
So yeah, great. I love that advice. Thank you.
Glad I could counsel you there.
Thank you. Thank you.
Have you read other books by this same author, or is this your...
No, you know what? I haven't, and I was looking up because there was supposed to be a movie made of it, and I thought, oh, I'd love to see what they did, but I don't think it ever got made. I think it was planned, and it was like a fake trailer and stuff. But I did learn that he had written a couple other novels, and I think I would like to check it out. I think Fire was one of his other novels. I think that was the name of it. I'm curious. Yeah, I'm curious to see. But then again, I also think I'm good. I might just want to reread this book again because I enjoyed it so much. So
the book I was talking about earlier, Station 11, she just released a new book, and I'm scared to read it because I love Station 11 so much, and I kind of just want to leave that experience perfect in my memory. And
is that a Harper Lee moment for you, potentially?
Yes.
I know what happened.
Yes, exactly. And it's dumb because I've read a lot of reviews and supposedly the next book's really good. And there's no reason I can't keep liking it. But it's neat when you have a book that's so special that it always just sort of holds that place in your heart.
Yeah. I mean, and I was really fortunate. So that scene that I read to you, I actually used a line of that in one of my favorite short stories about a book nerd who gets trapped by a bookstore that's like a Venus flytrap for book nerds. And I used that line that the stimulation of seeing so many books so suddenly was almost too much for the frail little boy. And that line specifically just had such an impact on me because that's the way I look at libraries and bookstores. I'm overwhelmed with, I'll never get to read them all. Oh no. And so it's funny how John Irving does this to me too when I read. There's certain lines of his books that just, they roll off the tongue like, lyrics of a familiar top 40 song. That they're just there at the ready for you to grab and ready for you to share it. Just the right moment with just the right book nerd.
Now, I'm going to have you on again because when I first invited you, I thought for sure you were going to pick A Prayer for Owen Meany because we have talked about that book many times. And I thought, oh, this one's easy because I know Mark's favorite book, and I was excited to read it.
And you haven't read it yet?
Oh, no, I've read it. I was excited to read it again.
Reread it.
But
I struggled, though.
To pick one?
Yeah, you saw me struggle. I changed my mind 5 times.
I know. I bought all of them as you changed your mind.
It was a ploy for me to help you support the book industry.
Well, I'm going to have you on again, and we'll for sure talk about one of your others, because talking to you about books is my favorite thing ever. What are you reading right now?
I'm reading a collection of short stories by Amy Teagan.
I love Amy Teagan's books.
Yeah, even though it's dark, it's a lot darker than the novel of hers that I loved, The Wedding Day. I am also reading about this Every House is Haunted. Ian Rogers is a Canadian author. I am in the middle of a Michael Anderle, Ellie Clark, the Ascension, the very first book in that series with Molly. I'm reading a couple nonfiction titles. I'm reading 4 different nonfiction titles right now.
Wow.
And I just bought 3 other audiobooks that I have because I just finished Earth Abides and I'm not caught up on my podcast listening. So, so many things to read. Where do I stop?
Yeah, it's always stopping that's a challenge. I'm going to tell you a secret. The Amy Teagan book that you're reading is Poison. Is that right?
Yes, Poison. Yeah, that's the collection. Yeah.
I'm going to tell you a secret. There is one story in there that's based on me.
Oh, see, I've only got about an hour left in it. I'm about 3/4 of the way through. So have I read it? Now I have to go back and reflect.
You're gonna
I
have
picked up something else that I guessed what she was writing about, and she said, "I'm not. No, I say nothing." And I was like, "I know why you say nothing," which I'm sure you know what that was about too. Or was that? Were you?
Maybe that was
in
the one about me.
I don't know. Now I have to go back and think.
Yeah.
Which,
Yeah.
Wow.
Well, I like the intrigue that's involved. I like that from now on you're going to wonder, and I'm just going to say, yeah, maybe. I don't know. Because there are some pretty devious characters in there, and, I need to get some street cred.
Street cred because you're too nice and people trust you enough. Yeah, that's right. Yeah,
that's what it is.
How about you? What are you reading right now?
I am reading the next book in the Inspector Gamache series by Louise Penny, another Canadian author who I adore. You know how much I love her. And I believe it is I think it's 7 or 8. And I love her books so much. I love her.
Yeah, amazing writer.
Yeah, incredible. I really just want to move to this little town near Montreal and live there and hopefully not get murdered, because everybody in that town eventually gets murdered. And
like on Murder, She Wrote. That's not a quaint little town, is it?
No. But other than that, it seems very idyllic.
And it's not far from Justin Trudeau, where he was born and raised.
Listen, I'm not going to say that didn't cross my mind.
Hands off him. He's my girlfriend's boyfriend.
Okay, fair point. Well, Mark, this has been a delight. Will you tell our listeners where they can find you online and watch all of your wonderful pandemic videos?
You can find me at markleslie.ca, and that links to all my social media stuff. Check out the YouTube videos if you want to laugh about the pandemic.
They are very fun. Well, this has been great. I want to thank you for introducing me to this wonderful book that surprised me so much, and I loved so much more than I expected. And thank you for always talking books with me.
I am so glad to hear how much you appreciated the book, Julie, and it is always an honor to get to talk books with you.
Thanks for listening, book nerds. For more information on this episode and links to all the books we discussed, please go to our website, bestbookeverpodcast.com, or follow the podcast on Instagram at bestbookever. I'm your host, Julie Strauss, and you can find me everywhere as Julie Wrote a Book. If you enjoyed this podcast, please share it on social media and leave a review on whatever podcatcher you use. Reviews really help our visibility to new listeners, and we are grateful for every one. Thanks for joining me today, and I will see you at the library.